so grateful that Stephanie is along with us, Life in
Yes.
Abundance, because all this stuff that's been going on. I mean, you've watched the news, you know, Floyd and all that other stuff
Yeah.
that's been going on. And by the way, this is going to be family friendly.
Yes.
Just to let you know, because we know your kids could be in the car along with you this morning, but how in the world do you discuss this along with your kids? And Stephanie's going to help us along with that. And how about protecting the kids? You know, there's all this violence in social media that we've been seeing. How do you walk through that?
This is a challenging time, and especially coming on the heels too of all of the COVID information that was out there. And we
Yeah.
talked one of the last times I was on about limiting exposure to news feeds and television. I mean, there's a lot of graphic images that are out there right now, not just on television, but on social media as well. And so I think limiting the exposure that kids have to all of that, because they're going to struggle to try to make sense of what they don't understand. And of course, everything being age appropriate is important as well.
Yeah.
That goes for adults too. Constant news headline checking and watching stuff all the time is not healthy for us. We want to be informed, but we don't want to become obsessive about checking headlines and watching things like that.
And should we really think through all of this? And I know we should before we talk to our children about it, to make sure that we consider everything and make sure it is age appropriate for them.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I would say too is that before you enter into any kind of discussion with your kids, make sure that you're in the right headspace also. When we're under anxiety and stress, and watching this unfold across our nation is stressful, and in our own hometown. And so make sure that you're ready before you enter into a discussion, because you may hear some things, depending on the ages of your children, that you're not prepared to hear. They may have differing opinions. They may have questions that you haven't thought of, and thinking through having a consistent kind of dialogue with your kids about this stuff, making sure that, your emotions are in check. They're going to mirror whatever it is that you're displaying to them in a conversation. So if you're angry, they're probably going to feel that way too, or not understand, or feel even worse, like they need to comfort you. And that's a heavy responsibility for children when they feel like they've got to comfort their parents.
Yeah, one thing you say is assume your kids already are aware of what's going on.
Yeah. Even with quarantine, everybody's sort of getting back to some things now. And it appears that your kids are going to have heard some things when they leave your house. You can't be around them all the time. And so they have friends that are going to say things to them. They have, social media accounts. Many of them at a certain age have that. And so they're going to hear something somewhere. If you're not the one that talks to your children, there's always somebody else in the wings who will. So it's a teachable time right now. It's a very teachable time.
Yeah,
right
for
now.
both of us, for parents and children. But, and of course, depending on how old your children are, we can limit their exposure, but that's going to look different, if you have a kindergartner or a senior in high school.
Right. So I was talking with another counselor with our practice, Angel Henning, and she and I were discussing sort of what she's doing with her family right now. And she has, some older children, but there's one that's around 12. And so we were talking about best practices. And typically, if your child is in grade school, you really want to shelter from the images on TV and the, social media and that kind of stuff. Go by their individuality as far as their emotional ability and their intellectual ability. Every child's different, but typically grade school, you want to really cut that. Moving into junior high and high school, limiting things. In fact, she schedules with her family, she schedules breaks with her daughter. And they schedule to just put their phones down and go and do different things, to lighten what they're looking at.
Stephanie Baker along with us with Life in Abundance Counseling as we talk about talking to our kids about what we've been walking through the past couple of days and what we've been seeing on TV. One thing you point out is conversations. You say be consistent, age appropriate, and just honest.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to explain at some point here that bad things do happen in this world, in this lifetime. I mean, it's scriptural. Jesus tells us that that's going to happen. But with your kids, you want to do so in a way that you're still reassuring, especially the younger ones, that they are safe and that they're protected. One of the things that you can do is sort of discuss that, yes, these things, if they're questioning or they seem to be afraid, you can discuss that this stuff is happening. It's not right outside they're with you, they're in your home, they're safe at the moment. Kind of normalize in that moment for them what they're thinking through. Put it in some perspective. I mean, yes, it's horrific, but we want to try to allow our home to be a safe place for our children. And the other thing that I want to mention is something called secondary trauma. Secondary trauma happens, it's emotional duress that's experienced by somebody as a result of prolonged exposure to details of somebody else's traumatic experience. It happened at 9/11 with video footage. There were a number of people that watched, significant clips of video footage of things, and they were experiencing secondary traumatic stress as well. And so that's when we're talking about protecting the younger kids and ourselves as well. That's underlying. That's one of the reasons that we're saying that.
Yeah. So what about the kids that say, I want to do something. I want to jump in and, help out or do this what do you say to that?
Well, first off, you want to encourage discussion around that and what they're feeling and what their perceptions are. You don't want to squash that. You don't want to squelch it. You actually really want to validate that they're wanting to do that. And then with them, help them try to find, help them with it, but help them try to find a positive way to get involved and to allow their voice to be heard. Within the community, there may be something going on with your church. There may be something going on with a peer group. And then that way you can help and make sure that what they're doing is wise and that it's safe. That's the key. But you want to allow them to have a voice. It's part of their it's part of their independence, and it's part of them breaking away from you a little bit as their think tank. They get to express and explore how they're feeling and processing.
Stephanie Baker along with us, Life in Abundance Counseling. You'll see all of these things that she's talking about and navigating a conversation with your child about what's going on the Rob and Liz blog that's at hisradio.com.